We begin this half hour with the growing influence of women in politics. The inauguration of Donald Trump 1 year ago today prompted women's marches around the world last year. A CBS News poll finds women are still dissatisfied with the president.
63% disapprove of the president's handling of his job. Half say his policies have hurt women. And 82% say it's important that more women are elected to office. Paula Reid is at the Lincoln Memorial, where this year's Women's March is set to kick off later today. Paula, good morning.
Good morning. That's right. The Women's March returns here to Washington, D.C. and many other cities across the country today. But they're not expecting those same record crowds that we saw last year. But organizers tell me they're not focused on crowd size. They're focused on winning elections. A day after President Trump's inauguration, millions of women donned pink hats and marched in protest. This year, it's less about matching hats and more about midterm elections. Organizers have dubbed it Power to the Polls.
We're really encouraging people to go vote in November of 2018.
Sarah Sophie Flicker is a national organizer for the Women's March.
We will absolutely be registering voters, getting out the vote, knocking on doors, having, conversations with people one-on-one about why it's so important to vote.
The effort is working. Emily's List, a Women's March sponsor, coaches Democratic women on running for office. They have trained more than 26,000 women to run for local, state, and national office over the last year. But the Women's March has come under criticism for only representing the views of liberal women. Rachel Simon was one of tens of thousands of women at the other big march in Washington, Friday's March for Life. She says the Women's March excludes pro-life women.
There is a blatant hypocrisy in the type of women the Women's March wants, and they're not a march or a movement about empowerment. They're a movement about picking women that only agree with them.
Flicker denies the Women's March is an event exclusively for Democrats. The march was a demonstration against a Republican president, and it's now turned into a movement to get Democrats elected. So is it fair to say the Women's March is a partisan event?
I wouldn't say that it's partisan, but I would say if you look at this administration, like who predominantly makes up this administration, white men. And I think what I can say about the Women's March is that it represents women's interests. And that's not partisan or nonpartisan.
Organizers will wrap this weekend's marches with a big event in Las Vegas tomorrow. They chose that location because it's in a state where Hillary Clinton defeated President Trump by a razor-thin margin. So it symbolizes how every vote counts, especially this year. Alex?
Paula Reid in Washington. Thanks, Paula. The early numbers show that there is going to be a surfeit, a historic high in terms of female candidates.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. The march last year was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. The spirit and the turnout was truly amazing. Be interesting to see what happens this year.